Hello. Hope you're all well. Haven't made a video for a couple weeks. This is probably going to be the speed at which I produce for quite some time. Went back to work last week, pretty much exhausted at the end of every day. I have enough energy to come home and collapse into my chair and stare at the wall, or in my case, the TV, for a couple of hours and do some productive things before I pass out. I do like my job, but it's tiring. It takes a lot of energy out of you, or at least it does with me. And from the sound of it, it takes a lot of energy out of pretty much any teacher. Schools are a lot different now. Those of you who went to elementary school 20 years ago or more than that, schools have changed quite a bit. Kids get to do whatever the fuck they want now. It's kind of scary. Frightening, really. Yeah. Kids are very much coddled and entitled now. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they are encouraged by adults to do so. So yeah, it's a very bizarre state of affairs in the United States. Yeah, human beings are just encouraged to be entitled little shits. Scary, scary business. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. It's a fucking beautiful day here in the Portland, Oregon area. It's just perfect. Weather's perfect. It's like 70 degrees right now. Yeah, things don't get much better. I hope you're all doing well. And I'm going to talk about a band that it's a type of music that I don't normally listen to. I don't normally like, but I do love this band. This is a band that I usually, this type of music is not something I normally give a lot of time to, but I did back in the late 90s. I discovered these guys and I really love them. I think they have an excellent songwriter and a very unique sound, and I'm going to talk about them today because they just released something, and it's an excellent album. It's an album that I return to many times over the years, and it's the 20th anniversary of the album, and I'm going to talk about it. And as you can see, I'm wearing a trucker hat of Grandaddy's. I bought this from, I know this is a horrible look for me. Awful. Trucker hats are not my thing, as you can tell. Part of the reason is I have a huge melon head. Trucker hats don't work for people who have huge fucking melons, and I do. I'll admit it. I have no problem admitting my foibles and my inaccuracies and my shortcomings in life. And one of my shortcomings is I have a very large head. you know. Uh, but I bought this. Granddaddy used to have a website. It was called Grandaddy Landscape. Yeah, Grandaddy Landscape back in the 2000s. When I say 2000s, I mean the early aughts, like 2005-ish. They had this site called Grandaddy Landscape, and I remember Jason Lytle or Lytle. I don't know how to say his last name. I always say Little. If it's Lytle, I apologize, but I say Little. Jason Lytle was pretty active on the landscape site. He'd go in there and talk, and you'd ask him questions, and he'd answer, and it was fun. But they had a store. They sold shit. And they still have a store where they sell shit. But back then they sold hats and shirts, and I actually have a skate deck. I bought a skate deck. I'm not even a skateboarder, but I saw this skate deck and I thought it was a cool conversation piece, if nothing else. I bought that. I was going to hold it up while I did this video, but I can't find it. It's buried deep in my storage unit, and I didn't want to go look for it. But they had a skate deck, and I have some shirts and some sweatshirts. I would be wearing one if it wasn't, 70, 75 degrees right now, and it's in the morning. It's supposed to get up to close to 90 today, so I didn't want to wear a sweatshirt. But I did find this. I bought this, I don't know, 15 years ago on Grandaddy Landscape. It's basically a dude in a wheelbarrow out in nature with a sad son. I thought this is a very good image to describe Granddaddy. Kind of happiness and goofery juxtaposed with a little bit of sadness. that describes Grandaddy's music in some really nice ways. Their music can be very sad, but it's also very uplifting and fun. And then it can be super sad again and wistful and beautiful. It's a very unique music. Again, it's not music I normally listen to, this type of music, but I love Grandaddy. And I think Jason Lytle is a phenomenal songwriter. And I think the greatest example of that is here. This is the re-release of Someday. This came out 20 years ago, which is fucking insane to me. I cannot believe it's been that long. But it is. This came out 20 years ago. It's crazy. I remember listening to this constantly when this came out. And I will admit, too, I listened to this. This came out on LimeWire. Do you remember LimeWire? There was Napster, sure, but LimeWire was even better. And I remember I got like, somehow this album got leaked onto LimeWire like months before it got released. I did end up getting a promo of this from the record label, but even before that, it was out on LimeWire. I don't know how it happened, but it just did. And the promo of this had "Fare Thee Not Well, Mutineer," which it looked like that was going to be on this album, but then it wasn't. That album came out on this little underground promo CD that they sold at their shows. It was called the Windfall Varietal, I think. I have it. It was CD only. It was like a little CDR, but it had this track. It was basically had some unreleased tracks and some demos and some live tracks, but it had this song on there called "Fare Thee Not Well, Mutineer." Beautiful song, arguably Grandaddy's best song. And it had been floating around for a couple of years. It came out around the Software Slump era. Software Slump was already out, but then they did a re-recorded version and put it on the promo of this. So it looked like it was going to be on this, but then when this finally came out commercially, it was not on there. Amazing song. But getting back to Someday. Someday is their third album. Yeah, third album. And I first learned of Grandaddy back in 97, I want to say. Their first album, Under the Western Freeway, had come out. And they had done some independent cassette releases. A couple of singles had come out, but I hadn't heard them until Under the Western Freeway. And I remember I got a promo from the record label, and again, it was that type of music that I didn't really like. That whiny indie bullshit, sad bastard hipsters sitting under trees writing sad poetry. I don't know. It's not for me. Like Neutral Milk Hotel, that kind of shit. Kind of music where you just want to blow your brains out. Like, that's not for me. No. So I had unfairly lumped this in with that type of stuff. But then I heard Under the Western Freeway and something else was going on here. I was like, ooh, this isn't bad. This is pretty good. And I later learned that Jason Lytle, one of his big influences was Alan Parsons, and I know that's not a great comparison, but that's kind of what I thought of when I first heard Grandaddy. That kind of ELO type of 70s magical synth rock. That's kind of what I thought of. Even Steve Miller Band a little bit, maybe. But it worked. There's something else going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it. What I later learned was that Jason Lytle was pretty good at writing traditionally cool rock and roll pop songs, but intermingling it with this new millennium type of technology, but keeping it in a lo-fi atmosphere, if that makes sense. He was really good at that, and Grandaddy that's sort of what they're known for, in my opinion. At least that's why I like them. That's why they stand out to me. They grasp just enough technology, but they keep that lo-fi vibe, and I like that. It's something that's very unique to them. And I think these guys do an excellent job at producing such a sound. And this is a 20-year anniversary box set. It has the album, Someday, and it has an album of B-sides, and then it has another album of demos of the whole album. And I love this album. This is my favorite Grandaddy album. I know a lot of Grandaddy fans would argue with me that Software Slump is their best album, which came out in 2000, right? 2000, I think. Software Slump is amazing. Don't get me wrong. Some days I feel like Software Slump is my favorite Grandaddy album. It's I think that was the album that just got them a whole new generation and cater of fans, which makes sense. By the way, these are the little bonuses. I bought this from their website and I got these little bonuses. I got a Grandaddy patch, more nature, very nature inspired. And then they put out this little autographed cassette. This has all the demo versions on it. It's everything you have on this cassette is also on a record here in the box set, but they put it on a cassette. I'll never play this. I do have a tape deck, but I don't have it set up. I don't know. I'm not playing tapes. I know tapes have come back recently. I never really got into tapes. The only time I ever made tapes is when I was doing my DJ mixes back in the day. So I have an old Onkyo dual cassette deck, but it's not even hooked up. I'll never play this. But Jason Lytle signed it. I thought that was cool. A nice little touch, I guess. Something I'll never play, but it all came with the box set. But yeah, Software Slump, I think, is an album that everyone goes to as their favorite Grandaddy album. And they also did a big box set retrospective a few years ago. I also have that, and it's awesome. One of the great things about Grandaddy and Jason Lytle are their B-sides and his B-sides. Lytle doesn't really write bad songs, man. He's extremely talented. Everything the guy writes is just fantastic. And his B-sides are no different. In fact, I would argue that the B-sides for the Software Slump are better. Most of the B-sides they could have been on an album. Most of the B-sides from Sumday are pretty good. Some of them are okay, but the album itself here, unbelievable. Unreal. There's not a bad song on here. And he covers all the spectrums of emotions on here. Now It's On is like the obvious single. That's the first song. It's a rock and roll jam. I remember they were on the Letterman show too. When this album came out, they did Now It's on Letterman. I love David Letterman. Loved him from the 80s all the way to the moment he retired, 8 years ago now? Huge David Letterman fan. Grandaddy was on Letterman. I'm on Standby, The Go and the Go For It. The Group Who Couldn't Say. That's probably the weakest song on the album, if you ask me. Lost on Your Merry Way. I said wistful before, and that's something about Granddaddy's music. It's like aching heart. It makes your heart ache, but it's fun at the same time. It's a balance that very few bands pull off. Honestly, if I were to compare Grandaddy to any band out there, this is a very loose comparison, but I might compare them to Radiohead a little bit. That's the same vibe I get when I listen to Grandaddy. It's music it's rock, but it's not afraid to embrace some electronics, and it's got a singer that sings in the soprano range, kind of a higher pitched, more androgynous voice. And it lends itself very well to what's going on here musically. And Lost on Your Merry Way is like that. El Camino's in the West is one of the more up-tempo jams. It was one of the singles from this album with a great video. Really funny video. A band that is not afraid to show its sense of humor. I recommend you check out that video. Yeah Is What We Had is an amazing song. Jason Lytle's really showing off what he can do as a songwriter on Yeah Is What We Had. One of those songs that just makes your heart ache. It's sad, very sad sounding song. Definitely sounds like a song that was written about a past broken relationship, maybe. At least that's the way I take it. You don't have to take it that way, but that's the way I've always taken it. Saddest Vacant Lot in All the World. Not my favorite song on this album, but still a strong song. Stray Dog and the Chocolate Shake is one of those up-tempo numbers. My favorite, this is side D. If I had to pick a side, it's a double album, 4 sides. The last side is my favorite. Okay with My Decay, The Warming Sun. Oof, beautiful song. And The Final Push to the Sum. That's the one song on here that kind of sounds like a Software Slump album or a Software Slump track. The Final Push to the Sum. It's like a slow, sad, ballady type track. Very dense musically. I don't mean lyric. I don't mean dense and like hard-headed dense. I mean like layered. Not just musically, but emotionally. Definitely sounds like when you listen to this, it sounds like Little was going through some personal shit when he wrote this. Beautiful, beautiful ending to this album. Those 2 songs, The Warming Sun. Oh, just a beautiful ballad, but in a very quirky way. It's if you've never heard Grandaddy, I encourage you to give them a chance. As I've mentioned before, this isn't normally the type of band I would listen to, but it's music that's just left of center. It's just off. It's quirky. It's odd. You're always kind of feeling a little off balance with this music, and I love that kind of shit. That's what I love about these guys. And someday, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, this is the last great thing they did. They did do a few albums after this. They had kind of an acrimonious split after just like the Family Cat. Is that the name of the album after this? Family Cat, right? That album has some brilliant moments on it, but as an album, I never thought it worked. And then they just put out an album several years ago. They broke up for a while, put out an album a few years ago, and it didn't work for me. This was their last big grand statement, I think. The build up. Under the Western Freeway was really cool, and then Software Slump was amazing, and then this was just on a different planet. And then they kind of fizzled after this, in my opinion. Just an opinion, but this is a great record. Check this out. And I don't mean pick up the box set. You can get this, you can go stream this. It's all over the place, not hard to find. By the way, it's called Sumday Twunny because this is the 20th anniversary. I'll break open the records here. I'll show you what's up inside. I showed you the tape and the patch. Pull these records out of here. I think there are five? Oh, four. Four actual records in here. Oh, this is called Excess Baggage. This is the B-sides and shit. I'm really glad that they just included everything from this album because, God, their B-sides are so good. My Little Skateboarding Problem. Yeah, I remember talking with Jason Lytle on the Grandaddy Landscape website about he tore his ACL years ago skateboarding. And I've torn my ACL as well. Not skateboarding. I tore mine playing football back in high school, which by the way, football season has started. Oh, very exciting. I know most of you probably couldn't give a flying shit that football season has started, but I do. I care. Love me some football season. But we used to talk about his torn ACL on the landscape site. That was the kind of shit you'd talk about. Real stuff. You wouldn't even really talk about music. You just talk about everyday shit. It was fun. I miss that. It would be cool I like talking with artists about just non-musical stuff. It's more interesting to me. Now it's on, yeah, that's a Colin Murray show, BBC Radio. Okay, Derek Spears, Getting Gypped, The Town Where I'm Living Now, Dearest to Scrambler, Build a Box, some B. Actually, Build a Box. I don't know that I've ever heard that. Was that released on a single? The singles from this album were Now It's On, El Camino's in the West. Was there another single on this album? I don't think there was there? I don't know. I thought those were the only 2 singles off of here. Maybe I'm wrong. Excess Baggage. There you go. And here's the cassette demos, which I just held up on that tape. It's basically every song from the album, just the demo version. I'll show the label. These cheap ass, you know how I feel about these cheap ass paper inner sleeves, but What are you going to do? It's what people do. Oh, well. The jackets are, I don't know, they're all right. They have those little perforation notches on the edge, which, I don't know. You can't get away from it. Just have to accept it after a while. I hate accepting shit that's wrong. And here's Sumday, the album itself. Gatefold sleeve. Here you go. And you guessed it, you get the oh so exciting paper inners. Boring labels. Black wax. I noticed on the website they sold this on, I think it was wiper fluid blue vinyl. I'm a little surprised that they didn't do some kind of funky coloring for this box set. I don't really care what color it is, but I guess I was a little surprised by that. And then you get an insert with lyrics. I don't remember. I had the original US pressing of this. I don't remember if they put an insert in there for the lyrics or not, or if they gave you printed inner sleeves. I do not recall. But you do get the lyrics. Jason Lytle is an excellent lyricist, just as he is an excellent songwriter and tunesmith. The guy's a super talent, man. Jason Lytle. Super fucking talented guy. And funny, great sense of humor. As I mentioned before, I would chat with him on the landscape site. He seemed like a very down-to-earth dude. Nice guy. Great songwriter. I saw him live a few times on his own. I remember I saw him open up for M. Ward here in Portland. Shit, this would have been back in 2007, I want to say. And he was drunk off his ass. I remember you could just see it. He was up on stage. He was just like, oh. He gave a really awful performance. It was just terrible. You could tell he was loaded. Maybe he was on something. He was on something. I assumed he was drinking. He had some beer with him, so he was either drunk or stoned or high or something was going on. Maybe a combination of all three. It was a terrible performance. Terrible. But I didn't care because I respect Jason Lytle and his skills. It didn't matter to me. He was there and he was performing. And he was doing the best job he could. And I love that about him. And I love this album. Please check this out. I know it's easy to judge this album and this band. If you don't like this type of music, I totally understand it. But I gave it a shot and I ended up loving the album and this band. It's sometimes you just have to put your judgments aside and really appreciate the skill one can provide with their songwriting prowess. And that's what Lytle does. The dude's a great songwriter. Give this a chance. This is an album that you might not normally listen to, but you might enjoy it. You never know. Give it a shot. You might like it. All right. Until next time. See ya.